call this meeting to order. Before we start with the agenda, I just want to highlight and express appreciation for town personnel being actually in North Carolina and South Carolina for disaster relief efforts. So from Public Works, we have Aaron McCluskey for the highway and ground superintendent deployed there. We have the Assistant Fire Chief Walter Ladder Jr. Deployed in South Carolina. Actually CMLP people, Rich Fabian and Matt Namara are deployed. I think it's important to recognize what the town employees are doing besides just working for the town and helping this crucial effort in North and South Carolina. And hopefully with the new hurricane hitting Florida, hopefully we will not have kind of more similar issues down there. So with that, we're going right to the review and approval of minutes.
I have a change.
You have a change, okay.
Under D4, stormwater utilities, second paragraph, my name is spelled incorrectly.
Oh.
It's a small thing, but I picked it up
Yeah, you know, that,
How could you find that?
right here.
Okay, yeah.
got
Yeah.
it, yeah. That AI, you know,
Sorry, Stan, before we take this up, do you have to call this to order?
did we not do that?
I thought I did that before.
Oh, I guess because Jeff is out as a roll call.
Oh, we did a roll call.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
All right,
Yeah.
let's do a roll call. Do we have Gretchen Robach,
Here,
David DeLong is excused, Andrea Solomon,
here.
Jeff Fesser,
Here,
and Sven Weber, myself here. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so this is one change. Other changes to the minutes? So do I hear a motion to approve the minutes subject to the change just discussed? Second,
Seconded.
okay, let's do a roll call. Let's start with Jeff Fesser,
yes, yay.
Gretchen Robach,
Here.
No,
Approved.
Jeff, approved.
aye or approved,
Aye.
yes. Andrea Salomon, Sven Weber, aye. So unanimously approved. Let's go to the review of calendar.
Let's see, Sven, I'll take from there. At this point, we are projecting, again, this is always a plan. Generally, it's cyclical with certain things that are, you know, done on an annual basis, but in November, we are tentatively planning a review of the roads program. We're going to be reviewing the FY 26 enterprise fund capital improvement plan, and we'll be doing a review of the winter maintenance program as well. And actually, I think I have to identify, there may be a conflict for 11/6. It's the or did we adjust that? Maybe we adjusted that from, it's usually the second Wednesday.
Yes, usually the second Wednesday, that reads like the first Wednesday.
And I think the reason is there was a conflict with a task force meeting with Warner's Pond.
Oh,
That was
okay.
gonna take this meeting room and they were doing, you know, taking over the entire facility. So I think we're proposing the first Wednesday of November. I just want to call that out. And Linda, correct me if I'm wrong, if you're listening, but that is probably why we changed that.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay,
And we can adjust it. We have plenty of time to sort of, if there's another date, but we just figured to keep it with the Wednesday if that works for you folks.
so on December meeting,
Sorry. Fly.
I will be traveling internationally, so that will not be able to.
So the first Wednesday?
For the December
Oh, got it, okay,
12/11.
all right. So
So
do
that,
we want to propose, the first or third Wednesday? Does it matter?
it depends on what you need for the town meeting warrant. What the
Yeah,
deadlines are.
it'll probably be, what we'll do is we'll look at the schedule.
Yeah,
And then we'll make sure in November, we're sort of identifying what dates might work.
Yeah.
Based on the town meeting.
yeah. I can't do the work before because I'm literally 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Out,
okay,
but the week after would
would
work
be
for me.
preferred, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's 12/18, and we're getting into
Yeah, yeah.
Christmas,
the holiday
holidays
and family arriving.
Yeah,
So it doesn't have to be a Wednesday either.
Yeah,
Which
you
so why don't I find out what the schedules are for other meetings, because that's what we're trying to marry to. And then we'll sort of discuss, the, November meeting, a time that might work, okay?
Okay,
Great, thank you.
all right, other comments on, meeting dates? No, so then let's go to public comments. So again, these are, this is time reserved for public comments, on topics that are not on the agenda. So public comments, will be limited to 15 minutes in total, with no more than 2 minutes allocated to any one speaker. If you're, speaking, please state your name and any relevant affiliations, the name and address, so that we know who you are, where you're from, and what other affiliations you have. With that, do we have public comments? Please.
Ellen Questenbush, 206 Prairie Street, member of Transportation Advisory Board, but Advisory Commission, but speaking for myself. I had a question about the recycling program, the new revised recycling program. And I guess I'd say, we're supposed to be, going to landfills and keep making recycling a habit. And yet I'm kind of confused as to why we have a 96-gallon recycling bin, but a 36-gallon solid waste bin. I at least, and I'd say a lot of people in my neighborhood are exactly the same. Maybe put out one, maybe two 18-gallon totes in a week and kind of fill up the 35 or 36, however big it is. So that's half as much or 75% as much. This model is 2.7 times as much. And it's like, well, maybe that's for people who don't recycle and are learning to recycle, but there's no accommodation or recognition for people who are your, good folks who are recycling and using reuse it and using the cardboard place. And so I'm really confused as if the model did take into account surveying people like myself who doesn't have a garage, who have no idea where I can put this bin. And who would like, in fact, to go back to the old model, if not the old format. I understand that there's no such thing as 36-gallon recycling, but can I take yellow tape and put it, yellow duct tape and put it in top or something? Because it's really, to me, it's quite a burden and unnecessary and doesn't recognize, Envision 2030.
Just wondering if it's best if you're, what's her name?
Justine.
Justine St. John,
Justine.
yeah. Well, we'll
We'll
acknowledge,
do this,
we'll,
yeah.
we'll acknowledge the comment.
Thank you.
And I think we will be, we've all volunteered, we'll be following up with Ellen directly, but we'll also, sort of, I think it's important for the
Yeah.
commission to hear this, and we are hearing similar comments.
Yeah, thank you very much.
No,
Yeah.
it's important for us.
One minor thing is, what are these overflow bags? Are those just the kind of bags you buy at Ace Hardware, or there's special bags that you sell?
Those would be, the bags, I'm not sure, I think they are, we'll get you the information. I don't know if we're going the old route where, the stores are carrying them, but I think it's the tags that's gonna matter, and I think
Oh,
they're
it's an A
limited.
bag,
Yeah,
but
I believe
don't
that's the
consider
case.
this why it's twice as much as it was before.
Yeah,
Anyway, we will
okay,
talk.
fair enough.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other,
Right.
Mark?
Yeah, Mark Davis, I'm also with the Transportation Advisory Committee, but just speaking by myself about a totally separate issue. Sort of come to my attention and my wife's attention that there may be some things, we could do in the town.
Oh, yeah.
The public trees that we, the town staff has to plant and maintain, et cetera. There's not to focus on just one location, but it's an example of what may be an emerging problem. My wife and I noticed that on Thoreau Street, at Hubbard Street, there's a request to take down a tree which, would be impacted by the construction of the driveway. But apparently, this was not addressed, during the design cycle or things like that. So I think, we don't, have, need to apply for a tree removal there. We don't. Looking closely to application for driveway permit, building construction or architectural plan review, et cetera. And, I think in this case, the, tree warden is saying that, potentially could be transplanted, but there's costs to the town and risk. And so this doesn't seem like something we should ignore. We should improve the process. I also happen to notice that, in Brookline, they actually have, a case where if you remove more than a certain number of trees, the separate angle, on private property, you have to apply to the, water, to the town departments responsible for things like, stormwater, et cetera. So I think we could up the protection of trees and, also make things very clear procedurally for the staff, because I think right now they're being required to make on-the-spot judgments that, case by case. Thank you.
Other comments? Online?
I see, Linda Neiman. Linda?
Hi, Linda Neiman, 59 Mallard Drive. I'm the co-coordinator of Mothers Out Fund. And I was hoping that maybe at the next meeting, we could get on your agenda to talk about a bike safety audit that we performed on from Concord Center to Bedford Depot. This was spurred by the recent death of a Concordian at the crossing of RBT and 62. And so on this audit, we took note of, in particular, the street crossings, basically where pedestrians and bicyclists intersect with cars. So I was hoping perhaps we could get on the agenda. And also I have a separate question, wondering, for this funding for the pavement of the roads that will be proposed at town meeting, if there are some, funds or thoughts put aside for, safety of vulnerable users like bicyclists, pedestrians, and folks in wheelchairs, that kind of thing. Thank you.
So on the capital question we talk later, so we will touch on that. So on the crossing, I'm not sure, is this Transportation Advisory Committee or?
It may be. What we'll do is, we've heard the comment.
Yeah.
We'll see how best to accommodate it and make sure that it can be addressed. And also, any of our agendas are sometimes, some of the issues are more time sensitive than others. So we'll
Yeah.
consider how that can be, where and how that's considered, but comments,
Part of the
Recognize.
problem with that, because I've looked into it, and I'd love to have those flashing, crossing, like when there's somebody there, the lights come on like they do on the Blue Stream Trail. But it's in Bedford, so it's actually out of our jurisdiction. So
in
it's,
this particular case. Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but that's part of the problem. The crossing where the woman was hit is actually in Bedford.
Okay.
Any other comments from the public? I see none on that.
That is it. No. I see yes, I do see another hand. I don't see a name, but a number.
This is Charlie Parker, 105 Chestnut Street.
Okay, thank you.
I think there's quite a bit of interest in the community and in plans for the Doug White Fields, as to whether we're going to have a natural grass field or whether we're going to have, artificial turf and so forth. And I think we would like to understand, your process for making your decisions about the Doug White Fields. We'd like to get on your agenda to hear what you have to say about your own plan and your own process, including both capital and maintenance going forward, as well as your kind of sense of direction for design. So if we could, somehow set that up, that would be great.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Other comments? Oh, one more.
One moment. My name is Mark Miles. I'm 298 East Bridge Road here in Concord. It's been 13 years since the town adopted the sustainability principles. At that time, I was a member of the Sustainable Energy Committee and was somewhat involved in their adoption. I testified before the select board and so on. And I've become concerned in recent years that perhaps the sustainability principles are being ignored. And so I have a sort of general question, and that is, how do the sustainability principles figure into any decision made by this board or any board in the town? It would seem that the decision, for example, on the new waste and recycling program, well, I have to wonder if the sustainability principles were considered, and if they were, I'd like to know how.
Okay, thank you. All right,
I'm not sure, Linda, if your hand went back up or came down, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that we were,
This is Linda Neiman.
yeah,
Okay,
sorry,
yeah.
Linda Neiman, 59 Mallard Drive, co-coordinator of Mothers Out Front. I wanted to point out that we wanted to focus we realized that the accident occurred in Bedford, but there's a lot of unsafe spots in Concord as well.
yes. Yeah. Thank you, noted. Thank you. With
Okay.
that,
Yeah.
let's go to the next agenda item, commissioner comments. Anyone of the commissioner having additional observations, thoughts that are outside of our today's agenda? No?
Do not.
Okay. With that, we go to the next agenda item, D3, stormwater. Enterprise rate discussion. We don't have to have we don't make a decision today. This is in the process, a very early discussion about the options, how it could look like for the members of the public here. The numbers might change over time. This is just a discussion for us to orient what makes sense and how can we incentivize more sustainable behavior with respect to putting asphalt and concrete on the respective properties. There's no decision today. It's just to inform us, get first picture. We will have to make our rate decision around or shortly after the next town meeting. So there's plenty of time between now and the town meeting, say, to have further discussions, adjustments, and input from the public with respect to the stormwater rate structure and level. With that,
All right, well, I will introduce sort of our team, Steve Dukran, town engineer, who's been sort of orchestrating the third-party support. We have Jerish Schwartz, who's a representative from Weston and Sampson. Jerish has experience doing assisting communities and standing up stormwater utilities. Very important to note, there aren't a lot of examples, but there are some, maybe a couple dozen now in the Commonwealth. It's becoming more and more common across the country as we are regulated through EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, on having sort of water quality and quantity controls in the stormwater system. Think of it as almost like sanitary waste was 100 and 200 years ago, where at one point you just got rid of the water and weren't paying too much attention to quality or quantity, but given, sort of the issues on the environment as well as climate, challenges, we're putting more emphasis on actually managing these systems. Including the management, we talked last meeting about what it might take for day-to-day management, establishing a budget framework for this utility that doesn't yet exist, but through town meeting, it's been identified as a enabled, enterprise. We are now talking about how to fund those budget needs, and this is the rate setting process. So Therese, I think I'll bring up a presentation, and Therese is here to kind of help guide us as we start this adventure. So I will try to share my screen, pull up presentation. And here we go. So,
All right, yeah, thanks, Alan, and thanks everyone for,
Get larger, so that.
let me do this, and also get rid of that.
yeah, thank you. Thanks to the commission for having me here. It's been a while. I was last here back in December of 2023. I know you guys have obviously continue to make a lot of progress since then. And yeah, things continue to move forward. So nice to be here tonight and talk about kind of where we are currently at in the process. So we've previously talked about a lot of these different stormwater budget drivers. I know that you had kind of a budget meeting last month. I guess I just wanted to kind of set the framework here that the goal is to have $1 million or so to work with for implementation of stormwater initiatives as part of this process. And in order to achieve that $1 million, we basically need to, because we're going to be allowing stormwater credits. We'll talk a little bit about that tonight, but we need to essentially raise a little bit more than $1 million. So we land with $1 million budget that we're hoping to have. So this just kind of, again, an overview of the process, obviously a number of different steps that have happened to date. So right now, tonight, what we're talking about is assessing those rates and what a potential fee structure could look like. Obviously, a few different ways that the fee structure can be set. Can look at setting kind of flat, keeping it a simple fee structure, flat rates. A certain amount would be assessed on a monthly or quarterly basis, aligning with the water and sewer billings. A lot of the driver here is really based on impervious area. If you have more impervious surface area on a property, you're contributing more stormwater runoff to the town's drainage system. So a lot of times you're calculating based on an established unit, which is called the equivalent residential unit. Basically is equivalent to the amount of impervious surface area that's associated with a single family residential property. And that's kind of set and utilized to extrapolate, rates that would be across the board to other types of property uses, larger residential, non-residential properties. Again, we're going to look at flat rates, some tiered rate structures, some different combinations of rate structures to try to see what might be most appropriate for Concord. I guess the most important thing here, though, to remember is that the rates are all based on and tie back to your actual cost for stormwater management. So who's basically required to pay the stormwater fee? So no one would be exempt from this stormwater fee. So all tax exempt parcels, town-owned parcels, state parcels, all would pay the stormwater fee. Basically any parcel that has an impervious surface area greater than 0 square feet would pay the fee. If there is no impervious surface area associated with that parcel, there would be no fee associated with that parcel. We do include vacant parcels. You'll see that reference to vacant parcels. I think that might imply that there's no impervious surface area, but that's not necessarily the case. We're seeing a lot of vacant parcels in town that do have impervious surface area associated with them. So the goal has been to obviously capture those parcels as part of this analysis. The other thing we've talked a little bit about in the past, and there'll be more discussion on, is private roadways as well. If there's a private roadway with drainage system that is not maintained by the town, should those property owners pay a fee as well? And we do think that, they're utilizing the roadways within town and the drainage systems associated with those roadways obviously need to be maintained. And that's a fee that really are costs that, everybody should kind of share in, even those parcels that are technically considered within a private way. But we'll talk a little bit more about how we can potentially maybe mitigate those fees. This slide really just kind of provides a snapshot, an overview of stormwater fees in Massachusetts, just so you can get a sense for what those other communities, what their rate structures look like, how much they're paying. I know Alan mentioned there's about a couple dozen communities right now in Massachusetts that have stormwater fees. Some of them are using, I would say for the most part, they're not able to cover all of their stormwater expenses through the stormwater utility. And that varies based on community. Sometimes it's been the MS4 permits really, in a lot of cases, the MS4 permit's been the driver, but they might only be paying their MS4 costs or a fraction of their MS4 costs, through the utility. So you'll see that the amount of revenue generated varies widely. I know we have 4.1 million annually there. That's for a client that we've been working with that has very stringent requirements under the MS4 permit related to phosphorus reduction, requirements that Concord doesn't currently have to the same extent, but could in the future. So something to consider. So it can.
I'm
yes.
sorry to
Oh, go
interrupt.
ahead.
Could you tell what MS4 stands for? I'm new to this
Oh,
process.
of course. So MS4 is the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. So
Thank you.
Alan had alluded to that EPA permit. So basically that's the permit that governs the town's drainage system, discharges from that drainage system to waters of the US. And it's really a permit that's all based on it's all about receiving water quality. So initiatives under the permit are based on with the goal of improving water quality.
Thank you.
Discharges, but it's a very costly permit to comply with. It's been around for 20 years or so. Current permit's expired. We're waiting on a new permit.
I will say it's been around for 20 years, but it's been designed to slowly educate and introduce various measures of identifying the need. And, we'll be talking about sort of our asset management, but we're about to go into the phase of this permit where there's going to be expectations of significant investments are going to be required for communities to continue to comply. And failure to comply with a federal permit means that they will then sort of intervene and start dictating, sort of programs, projects, and schedules. So you lose that independence once they decide you are not keeping up to speed.
Right. And so, and Alan's correct. I mean, we're definitely moving from more of what we've been in more of a planning phase to more of an implementation phase. And obviously when we're talking about construction, mitigation measures, obviously that's much more costly expense. There are communities that EPA has pursued for being, behind on certain requirements, and those communities are working to get up to speed. I've had some clients say, hey, is it, this permit is so expensive to comply with, how much would it cost if we didn't comply? But those fines are hefty. Those are hefty daily fines. You definitely don't want to go down that route. So. So this kind of, obviously a lot of legwork has been done to get us to this point in delineating the impervious surface area on every parcel within the town. And so this kind of just provides a breakdown here. So again, our target funding amount is that $1 million. But we know we have to collect a little bit more than that to meet kind of our budget. So we're looking at just over 1.1 million. We're assuming 10% will be given back in credits, which is kind of the standard assumption. The equivalent residential unit, we've talked about the average impervious surface area associated with a single family parcel. That's 5,570 square feet. We're starting out by setting the ERU rate at $118. So we'll look at how that could be applied based on these certain fee structures. The goal here though is to show well, what is the amount of impervious surface area associated with the 1 to 3 family residential properties versus the non-residential, larger multifamily residential? And we're setting up the fee structure. We want to make sure that the amount of revenue that's being collected from each of those different entities is comparable and correlates back to the impervious surface area. So we can make sure it's an equitable kind of collection of fees and stuff. And so that kind of just shows the breakdown there of that impervious surface area. And we're trying to correlate that fee collection accordingly.
So that means is with the 5,570 square feet, we are already, compared to the other towns in Massachusetts, we are the largest.
You're at the high end,
Yeah.
and definitely the highest for the
The
community that
highest.
we've worked with. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
okay,
Is that square footage include roof or just surface pavement?
No, it includes every different type of impervious surface type
Okay.
on that particular parcel. And I would say some communities might approach it a little bit differently. They might just look at the building footprint and the driveway. We try to capture every type of impervious surface area. It's all very well delineated. We're actually going to provide some examples of imagery that we've collected. So it is a pretty detailed and thorough analysis.
So you're using aerial photos to actually determine it?
Yeah, yep, aerial imagery and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and looking at the, kind of the two main parcel classification types. So we have the 1 to 3 family residential, we're calling that. And what that encompasses again is our single family residential, 2 family, 3 families. We do have a certain number of properties that have multiple houses on one parcel, 2 and 3 family condos, accessory land. So all of that gets kind of encapsulated under this 1 to 3 family kind of residential designation. And here's just kind of some kind of examples of properties that were pulled. Obviously, we have this level of detail and data for every parcel. But it just shows kind of these two parcels in particular, you know, they're single family properties. I believe the one on the left is just a single family home. So it shows an impervious surface area of around 3,500 square feet. Gives the lot size at the bottom there, about 15,000 square foot lot size. The next parcel, I think, is a two-family property, so it has similar impervious surface area as the single-family property, but again, much smaller on the lot size. But you can kind of see the different variations, so it's showing, you know, the paved driveway is delineated differently versus the paved sidewalk, walkway, the rooftop, so all delineated separately. And this is nice too, if someone comes before, you know, the commission questioning their fee or how it was derived, and you have this level of detail to provide. And I think the goal is for the town to make this information eventually available on the town website as well, so people can be looking up their parcels.
You're getting that information, sorry, out of the GIS?
Yes.
Okay.
Just by some chance, maybe somebody has been like porous, like bricks, you know, like having the holes in them. Do we have any of that in town?
Porous pavement?
Yeah,
Yeah, or pavers?
yeah,
Yes,
pavers.
Yes,
Okay, so is that being accounted for, and how is that?
it can be. So we are establishing a program, and so what we're working with Weston Sampson is to look at alternatives, but effective porosity is kind of what you're talking about. And that is something for the commission to contemplate as far as, you know, incentives or credits and that kind of thing.
Okay.
And then the larger classification of non-residential are large multifamily residential. So again, condos with 4 or more units, apartment complexes, other and commercial industrial properties, all of the tax exempt properties fall within this classification as well. So just to kind of set the tone of what that looks like. Here we have just some examples of the larger multifamily residential properties. You know, looks like we have a large condominium complex. I think that's the green complex, right? Green, trying to remember the name of it.
Concord Green.
And then we also have an apartment complex there on the right. So I guess obviously, you know, when you're looking at the impervious surface area, a lot higher associated with those types of properties. Things get a little interesting with condos too, and thinking about how those get fees get assessed to those, whether it's you're assessing the entire complex or you're assessing individual units. So something, you know, there's more legwork that needs to be done to look at, you know, definitely how the town wants to move forward with those, administering those fees and stuff. We've got some other non-residential parcels, Office Park, Strawberry Hill Road. So again, you know, really, you know, property on the left has almost 700,000 square feet of impervious surface area. So again, and that's why it makes sense to assess based on impervious surface area due to that wide variation. I think there was a little bit of questions about, you know, what percentage of the total impervious surface area town-wide different, you know, groups make up, you know, within like the 1 to 3 family residential classification here. We tried to create a little table that shows what percentage of impervious area is associated with that 0 to 2,500 square foot tier. So basically from 0 to 2,500 square feet, about 2% of the impervious area town-wide is associated with parcels that have impervious area that are falling within that tier. So kind of just provides a little bit of a kind of oversight there, an overview, I guess, of how that breaks down. And we did the same thing here for the non-residential and larger multifamily residential, just to kind of give another kind of look at the overall data and where that impervious surface area is coming from. We had some questions about different zone classifications. So we've got a little table here that provides information regarding zone C, B, AA and A classifications, and the impervious surface area associated with those classifications within each kind of tier group there. So again, just showing that zone AA and zone A have a majority of the 1 to 3 family residential parcels in both the second and third impervious area tiers. Where there's less impervious surface area associated with the zone Z and the zone B.
Again, these are planning district, you know, zoning.
Right,
You know, so
yeah.
to compare, so you can get a sense of, you know, what the town has its zoning, and you see density and size and all that.
And where that impervious surface area is coming from. Yeah, just kind of gives a snapshot. So the first option that we looked at was based on a traditional kind of ERU rate structure. We looked at, what if we keep things simple for the 1 to 3 family? What if we assign everybody the same flat fee, right? And there's benefits to that. in terms of the fee collection process. When you're charging based on impervious surface area, there's tracking and level of effort associated with that going forward. As impervious surface area changes, tiers might change, how much they're paying might change, and that's something the town would need to kind of keep on top of. And there's, like I said, just a certain level of effort associated with that to think about. You want to make sure the money that you're collecting, of course, is going toward actual projects and less with administrative needs and stuff too. And then for the non-residential large monthly family, the most equitable way to kind of assign fees is based on the exact impervious area and correlated back to the equivalent residential unit. So that's kind of what this first option kind of entails. So if you can just go to the next slide. Kind of provides an overview. So under this scenario, all of those 1 to 3 family residential classifications would all pay the same flat fee of $118 to raise approximately just under $600,000 in fees.
Per year.
This would be in per year. Yep, exactly. Sorry. Should put that clarification there. And then for the non-residential, large residential, everybody's paying exactly based on their impervious surface area. So just to keep it simple, if, the impervious surface area on a parcel was 4,000 square feet and our ERU is only 2,000 square feet, they would pay 2 ERUs. So 2 times 118 would be the amount that particular parcel would have to pay. And it's nice in the sense because, you're really paying, it's very equitable. You're paying exactly for the larger residential, non-residential, exactly based on your impervious surface area. But could be a little bit more cumbersome in terms of tracking because anytime there's, impervious surface added to a particular parcel, then you're kind of recalculating the fee for that property. But again, we're generating about just over $1.1 million under that scenario. And that was, kind of how we geared every scenario toward that amount of revenue. Option 2B is looking at more of a tiered structure for the small residential. Again, noticing and recognizing that there's variability in impervious surface area for smaller residential properties and wanting to, put forth a more equitable fee structure for those properties. And so we tried to look at kind of, different tiers. Again, try not to overcomplicate things, but I think it's kind of a balance. And then we also did a tier structure for the non-residential, larger multifamily residential. And that does help to simplify things a little bit. Because if someone's impervious surface area were to change, it doesn't mean that they'd actually be necessarily in a different tier. So it kind of hopefully eases that burden a little bit as well. So again, just option.
These are step functions in a certain sense, yeah? So it's not linear, like in the first one, the large the non-residential is a linear function with here ERU. And here you have step functions and these are the breaks.
Yeah, so we did try to, it's still tied back to the ERU.
Yeah.
So it's based on the average impervious surface area for that tier. And then we divide it by the ERU. So there's some, still some basis in terms of coming up with that number, but essentially in the end, you're still kind of assigning a flat rate to that particular tier. And then here, again, I mean, there's just, different ways, area,
Call out just, curious so we understand, this is a 10 tier.
Yeah.
In this other residential, non-residential.
Yeah.
In the different tiers, this is.
Got an extra tier for the smaller residential. You've got 5 tiers under this scenario.
Again, the model, help us understand what we're doing with these tiers, and again, based on experience. These recommendations are just based on what other communities have done.
Yeah.
Pros and cons, is there anything worth sharing on that?
I think, in some communities where they found more of a disparity, again, with those 1 to 3 family residential, they felt like it was more appropriate to do kind of a tiered structure. It was just more equitable across the board. Where their communities didn't find as much variability, they thought, hey, I can go with, with a flat fee for the smaller residential. In some communities, they said, well, you know what, for the most part, we're kind of all within the same relative ballpark in terms of the impervious surface area, but maybe there's some really strong outliers. And so, I have one client I know that was looking to capture, they captured probably, 90% or so under those first few tiers. And then those outliers are maybe the other, I think it was 9% or so, where they had it a much higher higher tier just to capture that differential and stuff too. So I think, but again, you don't want to overcomplicate it. I've seen communities go like with 7 tiers for like the, small residential and then kind of take a step back and be like, all right, I think it was just too much tracking and effort. And, does it really get us that much more? So.
Is there, again, this might be for future discussions, but is there a way to understand how much people have under control on this? So the roof area is not really under control. You can't do a lot in that. So it's mainly the paving, walkways and other things you can try to incentivize behavior to use other material. Is there a way to understand how much of that impervious area we are talking about is kind of a fixed roof area? And how much is kind of, if people use different material for paving or for the walkway, can be changed?
Yeah, and we can certainly provide a breakdown of what that looks like, because we have that level of detail for each parcel. With the roof area, it might be more about, a lot of times that hopefully a lot of that runoff is already captured, on the site as an opportunity to infiltrate, but it could be directed toward a paved surface and obviously be making its way into the roadway. So there might be some improvements that can be made to make sure that that runoff from the roof is obviously staying within that parcel and stuff too. But I know what you're saying in terms of other opportunities to incorporate like pervious pavement or other things that can be done or reduce overall impervious surface footprint. That would probably come more from some of the other impervious surface areas on that parcel.
And you would talk about credits.
Yes, yeah, we have a system on credits.
Move on. And
Yeah.
Just trying to follow where you are.
And this was just another scenario. I looked at the tier, 3 tiers for the, the 1 to 3 family residential, larger tiered brackets. Again, trying to kind of isolate more some of the outlier properties under this scenario. So credits, obviously something that, is important to the town. It's something we talk a lot about. So one of the first things would be to look at creating kind of a credit policy, that would be put before the Public Works Commission for review. And so there's lots of different types of credits that different communities offer. And so we can be thinking about what might be appropriate to Concord. We might want to try to align some of these credits with what you currently do on the water and sewer enterprise side of things, as well as, so this is about, properties, especially larger properties that are going to manage more of their stormwater on site and make sure they're getting credit for that. Typically, there would never be a credit that would be more than like 50%, because again, it goes back to that overall maintenance of the town's drainage infrastructure on public roadways and wanting all of those property owners to share into that kind of responsibility and stuff too.
So you would see credits as a percentage rate.
A percentage, yes.
And with the maximum credit, you can get 50%.
Right, and we could see what, what we'd want to equate that 50% credit to. What would that look like, So, and then this, when we had private ways listed here, we thought this might be an area where we could revisit kind of that discussion and think about those private properties and maybe some type of credit as well. So their fees aren't quite as high, given the fact that they, have separate private drainage infrastructure that they're tasked with operating and maintaining as well to make it more fair.
What would education credits be for? Like
That one, there was another community that had implemented some education credits, and it was kind of really more specific to maybe like private schools that are doing some special education around stormwater initiatives. And so they were allowing some kind of credits associated with that as part of their kind of curriculum and stuff. But I mean, we can certainly explore that a little bit more.
No, I was just wondering what that meant. Like if I go to a lecture, do I then get like
a credit for you
10
personally?
$10
Yeah.
off? That's what I'm wondering. Figure out how to.
Yeah, I know it was really associated with some, certain types of private schools facilities and stuff that would promote that. Trying to think if there's anything, we could do certain credits based on, is it, flood mitigation benefits, it's, water quality benefits. I know we talked a little bit earlier about phosphorus and a lot of the, big initiatives that communities are required to do under this MS4 permit are around phosphorus reduction, removal through, stormwater retrofits. And I think that's something important to think about too down the road, because if property owners are adding stormwater infrastructure and maintaining that stormwater infrastructure, there's a way for the town eventually to get credit under the town's MS4 permit. And so that does alleviate the burden on the town a little bit too, as long as those are being maintained.
Yeah, it's an education and awareness, and again, the permit and the driver for stormwater management is quality and quantity. And it's not just recharge, it's oftentimes we think, we just recharge the ground, it doesn't go into the storm system. Well, ultimately it ends up in the river or pond. This is all interconnected. That's how EPA looks at this sort of thing. So it's to incentivize good practices, and we've got to educate. But there's a limit. There's still going to be impacts on water because it's raining, snowing, and it's washing off. And we're just trying to figure out a way to do it equitably. And, that's sort of the approach. So,
yeah,
because there's some models out there, I think, Therese, this is what you've sort of discovered from other communities or what they're doing. So, Concord will probably share some common interests, and we may come up with our own ideas. But again, the issue is to try and help people do what they can to improve environmental protection on their site, but also understand that we're still going to be managing common infrastructure too.
One general approach we've seen for credit is to look at if what's being done as for improvements on the parcel is beyond what's normally expected. So that's a consideration we should start with.
That's right. There are rules and regulations on stormwater management, that's again, part of the same venue, but if you go above and beyond, then that's, certainly merits consideration.
right. So if a property owner wanted to get a credit, they'd have to obviously submit an application, to the town. And then obviously you need staff to be able to kind of, especially if it's a stormwater retrofit project, obviously be able to go out there and, inspect the site or review the information being provided, and just obviously a separate level of effort kind of associated with that. So a lot of communities, especially communities that set up enterprise funds, are leaning more toward having like a stormwater engineer on staff that's kind of full-time tasked with some of those responsibilities.
I think it's also important to understand, relatively speaking, we're talking about $100 for a, sort of, small residence or so. Larger commercial facilities, it could be tens of thousands of dollars a fee. So that's going to incentivize them to do things that may have a more even significant impact.
Right, right.
I think generally, we want to have an incentive on both sides, I'd say, on the non-residential, that they reduce their concrete and asphalt or whatever. But even if you look, let's say, if you take, I don't know, what is this one, option 2B here, where the smallest one is around $41 per year, which is kind of cheaper than your monthly Starbucks coffee. But it goes up to 733. And even tier below is close to $300. So that there is an incentive for also on the residential side for people to reduce the area and get down to in the tier. And have that reflected in it. So this was the end of the presentation, yeah?
Yeah, so we just have the next step slide where we were just gonna
Okay.
talk about kind of
Yeah,
where we're
okay.
currently at. Obviously, I know the stormwater budget obviously is gonna go before Springtown meeting, so that's still in the process of getting finalized. And, by town meeting, I think we also want to have an idea of what the rate structure and the rates are gonna look like, although I know they don't have to be finalized and won't be voted on at town meeting. But I think if the goal is still to try to move forward with fee collection July 1st, or is
Well,
that?
that's where it's interesting. We've been talking with, I've been talking with the CFO, and we're trying to find out how to align a budget that we need for FY 26, which is money.
Yeah.
Authorization at town meeting, but then to be supported through rates that haven't been established yet. So
Yeah.
we're gonna work through those mechanics so we can understand how that can be done. It's clear, and what's really important is this work is driven primarily by regulatory compliance, so it's not, it's a question of the programs as an enterprise designed to sort of look at a source of funds that are more equitable than just, taxes. Not all properties in town pay taxes as well, so we're gonna be working through a lot of these details, and it's gonna be very important that whatever program we do, it's something that can be implemented. And that's where I'm eager to find out what other communities have done as far as how to identify a property that may or may not have other utilities on it, but does have an impact on stormwater, for instance. These are things that we need to know, and I'm, talking with, the finance, CFO, earlier. We're even looking at, potentially investing in some billing software or using our financial, town financial platform to maybe be the venue of how we'll send, such, fees out.
Yeah.
But this is all, we're in the process of literally going through that discovery, and, step one is, what's the budget? Step two is, what kind of rate structures are we talking about? And then really for the Public Works Commission, we're gonna come back, you'll have an official action, not just educating and awareness, but you are the rate setting authority based on the bylaw that was passed to establish this fund. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there is a lot of reconciling of data to get to the implementation phase of this. Obviously, we have the impervious surface area of all these parcels, but like you said, Alan, not all of these have utilities associated with them. And so, we've talked about generating separate billing for some parcels, which, there's a whole other level of effort and stuff.
Great, you seem to have a question.
Yeah, I'm just concerned, looking at our meeting schedule, that we are going to have the hearing the last meeting before town meeting, and I expect that this is gonna be a very well-attended meeting. And that I would think we would need at least 2 nights for that, and maybe if we could shift that back. I worry if we wait too long before we do that, we won't go to town meeting.
So to be clear, that is the town meeting, we won't be having the rate hearing till after town meeting, once we have the full packet sort of clarified. So the budget will be presented. We'll have sort of mechanism of what we're looking at for rates, but the hearing will be after with the Public Works Commission.
We have a little chicken and egg
Okay.
situation here. You need to have first approved budget. And then can set the rate. So far, what we're trying to do is having like meetings like this very early on. I'm starting to digest and get our arms around potential structure. Also getting input, as much input from the public before the public rate hearing, which technically I think can only be done after the town meeting approved the budget, for which we then set the rate. If you're not getting the budget approved,
Okay,
then there's
Great.
no rate hearing.
all right, so my question is, at what point are we gonna decide out of all these different options? I mean, I'm assuming that we have to know what we wanted to ask at town meeting.
Well, between now and then, we're gonna be having discussions in the community. We're introducing the commission first, but this is the beginning of a process,
Okay,
not for our meetings. We will then go out to talk to FinCom, we'll be talking to the select board, we'll be talking to probably the League of Women Voters. All that stuff is gonna be what staff will be doing. I just wanna be clear, your role is to help with the education, help us understand what makes sense, and, listen to some of these comments and feedback we get. And then, when we have a recommendation, it will be basically, here are the various alternatives, and that will be a decision for
And
the.
we'll
So
have it
I
on
think
our
it's from a process perspective. For the town meeting, we will have hearing on the budget, because we are proposing the budget. The budget is up for vote at the town meeting, not the rate.
Okay.
But for that, we already have to have some anticipated rate structure and rate level.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say if you're not going in with an anticipated rate structure and rate level, probably everyone in town meeting will just say, what does it cost? You're asking for $1 million, and what does it mean? for me and everything. So we have, this is this chicken and egg situation here.
Okay.
So we have to more or less, I anticipate that we have to have the hearing around our budget, that a fraction of that is used on the rate.
Okay.
And get feedback, but making clear the town is not deciding on the rate. But it's needed information for the budget.
And Doris, do you have any experience, because we're not the first community, part of breaking this into a two-step process was a model that was sort of recommended and it's been done and practiced out there. Can you shed some light as to, you know, even with town council, they were, you know, supportive of this model? Maybe you can help shed some
Yeah,
additional
no,
light.
I think it's kind of nice. I think it's a little bit of a stepping stone. In terms of getting the public acquainted and, you know, customized to the idea of adopting a stormwater, you know, enterprise. So I like the idea of being, like you said, and also fully kind of transparent. I mean, unfortunately, I've seen success stories and I've seen, you know, stories where unfortunately, you know, we've gone before a town meeting, we've done a lot of follow-up and unfortunately, it, you know, it didn't pass. I had a scenario recently at last Springtown meeting where, they had kind of done a similar process, had the enabling legislation passed and in place for quite a few years. But were never collecting any fees as part of their enterprise. And so, you know, put forth a budget, and unfortunately was not approved at town. Well, I shouldn't say. So they basically looked at two different scenarios. They said, well, we need this money for stormwater and compliance. So either we're going to get it as a line item through the general fund, or it's going to be funded through the enterprise. And so at town meeting, there was a different option. You can vote for the general fund budget that included kind of the stormwater, the stormwater line item, same budget that was being carried through the enterprise, or it'd be carried separately through the enterprise, because this particular community wanted to make sure, you know, at the end of town meeting, they were going to have the funding they needed, for stormwater. And, you know, the community just chose not to pursue the idea of the enterprise, you know. Interesting enough, but we had some, you know, opposition. I mean, it's something that still, you know, they'd still like to see go forward. And then, you know, I've had another community where it was putting forth a $4 million budget, which you think would raise a lot of questions, and passed. Questions asked, you know, there was a bunch of meetings leading up to it. And yeah, so I mean, I think, you know, it's interesting to see how things work in different communities. I've seen, you know, where people have spoke against it and then, but really the majority were in favor of it, and it passed with flying colors too. And I will say every community that has adopted an enterprise has said, you know, it's been life-changing to, you know, the Public Works Department in terms of being able to have the funds they need to accomplish, you know, a set of stormwater tasks, whether it be related to their permit or flood mitigation, to have that dedicated funding source to finally be able to get a handle on the condition of their system, which, you know, they've never televised or inspected most of their systems. So to have the money each year to allocate toward that is just, I mean, you know, having to worry about having the funds and then to have this money available and to be able to allocate, you know.
To do, you know, preventative maintenance, not emergency
Yeah.
response, which has been our MO recently. I mean,
Yeah.
it's also important, the bylaw stipulated that any fees could not be assessed until after July 1st of 2025. Anyway, so that was part of the process of just check and balance. So this is gonna be an interesting dance, but it's gonna be a dance, and the whole idea is we're gonna try and make sure everybody is as aware as they can be. And even with that, we're gonna hear at the 11th hour, what's this utility all about? So this is the nature of the beast.
Another outcome that could affect the fees could be an amended budget
Yes, could be.
at the town meeting.
Someone says as we cut it in half.
Yep.
Was there a big difference in community education between those two towns that you talked about? The one where they got the big budget approved, no problem, and the other one that decided to go through the general fund?
I guess I would say the other community that had the bigger budget, I feel like they had done a lot related to stormwater in town, you know, and kind of, you know, trying to really articulate kind of stormwater needs under the permit. There was a lot of messaging and education around that. So I think that might have set the tone for kind of the importance of having that funding. But in looking at the meetings that were done leading up to each, unfortunately, I don't know, unfortunately, they weren't that well attended, I would say, for both communities, unfortunately. one thing that I think one of the communities missed would have been nice if they had like a champion in the community too. It was also unfortunate that we were getting a lot of feedback on the town meeting floor. That would have been nice to have those conversations. And that person just didn't really, approach we had like a stormwater committee set up, they didn't approach the committee, stuff that we're like, oh, wow, I wish we had had the opportunity to talk with that person. Because they had a lot to say on town floor that we could have talked about, leading up to town meeting, and probably answered a lot of questions and stuff too, that maybe it would have gone in a different direction.
It sounds like there was a lag time too between when they passed the initial.
It was,
bylaw
yeah.
to
It
when
was
they
probably
actually
about
said
5, it was about 4 years, yeah.
Okay.
So,
I think Jeff has a question.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Thanks, Sven. Do you have an idea of the difference in the admin costs between the flat fee option and the one that's tiered? Because as you said, it will require more support time.
yeah, I mean, some communities have made the decision where they're like, it's so much effort to track it on a continual basis. So they're like, all right, every so often, we're gonna just redo, have like a new flyover and update all of the data at one time.
Yeah,
And maybe that's okay for the smaller residential, because I feel like the difference in fee might be minimal. But obviously, if you have a big development project, right, and something changes a lot on the large residential, non-residential side, I think you'd wanna obviously capture that, earlier. And maybe that's through, the permitting process, you're tracking that. But I guess I don't have a sure way to, I guess, quantify that. But there definitely is a definite level of effort. You need to think about like, who's gonna be tasked with that responsibility, because
right.
I could see that as like a full-time position when you're thinking about all these stormwater needs under the
Yep.
utility, or at least someone's half-time position, just managing the
Right.
administrative aspects of the utility.
The other question, and I raised this before, but I did vote for this bylaw, but I had some questions before about if we have a property owner that's very conscientious and they're not allowing any runoff from their property to go onto the street, why should they be paying anything? And the response was because this also deals with the streets that we all use, public parking lots that we all use. So there was that resource that needs to be maintained that we're all using based on, most of us, if not all of us, using cars to get around town, different modes of transportation. So my issue at the time was with stormwater, with sanitary and with water, there's a certain amount, there's a volume that is measured. With stormwater, there's not a volume that is measured, and you can't really measure how much stormwater is going off property and how much people are driving on roadways. So to me, the flat fee has some kind of plays into that. And could you go back to the flat fee slide? And where there's, for residential, was it a flat fee for all, or was there more than one flat fee for residential?
So the option one was the flat fee for all of the, it would be that flat, everyone would pay $118 under that scenario, all of those, smaller residential properties. Everything would be the same.
Okay, just want a lot to think about here and how to make things equitable. And there's, in addition to all the things you just talked about, there are all these other things about, well, maybe nothing from my property is running off, but then it is going into groundwater, and then it's eventually ending up in public body of water. And how do we account for that? But we're really not, we may not be managing that with infrastructure. Catch basins and pipes, in other words.
That's right. However, it may point to what we need to do where, when it's phosphorus, for instance, or something, we're gonna mitigate that elsewhere, because that's what the regulations are driving. So that's why it's this balance of quantity and quality. It's complicated, and there's many ways of slicing and dicing it, and that's what we're gonna be discussing over the next, 6 months or so. But they're all good questions, and this is, we're not at the tip of the spear, but we're ahead of the curve. But there are other communities that have gone through it, and I don't know, perfection is is in the cards, but we are
Yeah,
trying to
right,
do the right, and it speaks to the whole sustainability principles of
yes.
what we're trying to achieve, so,
Yep.
yeah.
Other
And I see-
question, and this is not meant to complicate things, it's more complicate things, it's just a informational question. Has any community approached this as adding a fraction of a percentage to everybody's property tax bill?
So I was gonna say that, so, I've had a couple communities where they've decided to just do a flat rate for all parcels. So non-residential as well as residential, some smaller communities, you know, they wanted to get a utility up and running. So I've had, you know, them kind of standardize it that way and really simplify the process, just to start generating kind of some revenue. But I would say a lot of communities maybe that might have gone down one path with a fee structure might have realized after, oh, let's revisit it, let's make it more equitable, or maybe we made it overly complicated and, you know, so I
Yeah.
feel like that's not unheard of. I guess as part of, I guess my understanding is you can't put a stormwater fee on a tax bill, so that wouldn't be a billing mechanism, I guess.
It would go in the general
Got
fund. So I think that would be, again, it would go back to the old model, into the general fund. So then A, you have to
Oh,
put
got
that
it, yep,
in the general fund, and B,
yeah,
remember, this bylaw, would put a levy out on every property,
yep,
not just the tax paying properties, which is a significant difference. Yeah.
Yep.
And again, making it more equitable is, I guess, in a certain way is where are the large lots, and you can easily identify the large lots on the non-residential side are typical kind of private schools and other things where
Yeah.
because they have a non-profit status, they would not pay the tax.
I was just thinking, we did do that for one community. We kind of did a little scenario where it was said, well, if the money was raised to the general fund, then how does that impacting their taxes, and where is that additional funds coming from? How is it being distributed among those same parcels? And the difference was because of the tax exempt parcels are not paying.
yeah,
So then there's more burden on like the single family homeowner under that scenario. And we thought that would be like a real selling point. But fortunately.
Yeah.
Even with that demonstration, people didn't seem to, I don't know.
So given we have another big topic coming.
Yeah.
On the, so just want to, from the commissioners, any other questions?
No, but we'll be hearing about this.
Yeah, we
Like,
will
if-
be hearing.
This is not a one and
This
done.
is not,
I'm
not
expecting
a, not a.
See a lot of
one and done.
DVDs, you know, this will.
Yeah,
Uh,
which is why I was worried
Yeah.
about, like,
The only question I would have, and we are lucky to have, the town manager and, our CFO here, is again, this question we had around the timing, this town meeting and rate setting, and how we put, let's say, if you're saying is we need a $1 million of budget, are we putting a placeholder first into the general fund and then get the enterprise fund approved, and then we take it out again out of the general fund, or I'm just thinking is don't know answer necessary, not necessarily now, but to think about how to make sure we are sitting here in whatever July next year and know what is the budget for stormwater. Yeah, so if you don't have a line item in the general fund and it would be rejected as a separate budget, then we would end up with zero money for stormwater. So thinking about it, I think is an important element, and I have no idea how to solve that in the first time.
Well, it may be as simple as just placing this article before the budget article.
Yeah.
On the warrant.
But then you need to have two general budget things, say one with and one without, or an amendment at that moment. Or whatever. Okay. Questions from the general public? Here in the room? Online? Do we have questions online?
I don't see any.
can I make a request to get some materials like other communities have done? See, I would love to actually read like what they have and actually look at their policies, just to get a sense of what the final looks like. Is that possible?
Sure.
Yeah, we have a summary of like all the different rate structures for all the other communities. So if that would be helpful, but then
that'd be
we can
great.
also, but yeah, any other things you're thinking of that would be, we can provide more information on.
And there will be a report, I'm sorry, we didn't mention that, but please, we are going to provide a report to the commission fairly soon, right?
Yeah,
We're-
yeah, and we've had a draft for a while. We're
Yeah,
just kind
so
of
that'll be
tweaking it at this point.
question when that's due, we'll include it in the packet and maybe, sort of discuss that report.
Yeah, and what would be great are also this credit.
Yeah.
Options to understand what can citizens and fee-paying entities do to reduce in various area.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
have examples
Best
of what
practices, yeah.
best
Yeah.
practices and explain. I think there will be a lot of education we have to do.
Yeah, and the report does have a lot more detail on those different potential credit options too. But yeah, if there's anything else you think of that, we touched on, or it'd be helpful to have more background information, please let us know.
All right, so with that, we go to capital plan.
Okay, see in the packet, what you've received is at least a draft. We are trying to work with the town's schedule as far as, providing a capital plan for review. We work closely with the town manager's office, the CFO, and again, Carrie LaFleur, who's, in the audience, as well as Anthony Insalvi, who is our CFO. They have yet to see our proposed draft. This is just to have some discussion. We are now working on a new software platform for the town, which is called ClearGov. And that's going to allow all of the departments to package their budget proposals or recommendations in a standardized format. Because it's new, Public Works has been sort of, learning, educating, ourselves on how to get that information into this beast. But when we're done, I believe it's really gonna help everybody in town better understand and connect the dots between the different departments, see where all the capital initiatives are with explanations. But we provide you, Gretchen, as sort of a newbie, we provide this annual summary. And the idea is that you can take a look at these high-level line items, bins of kind of programs, with a description of those. We don't get into all the details as far as, at this meeting, but we're here to talk sort of high-level concepts. And what I want to do is I will bring up on the screen, I will share at least the spreadsheet, which summarizes basically what you'll see on the spreadsheet in the back. It's a 10-year plan with the various programs, I'd say, that are in the left-hand column. And to be clear, for Public Works, we have a lot of different programs, but we focus on the general fund supported programs. This doesn't include water, sewer, solid waste recycling at this point, because they're enterprise. But to get this information to the townhouse sooner rather than later, that's what we're focused on. And if you look at some of these in the descriptions, we're here to answer any questions, but I think in the big picture, I'm gonna just provide one summary. And if you look for in this column here, FY 26, what we are, well, let's start with 25. In 25, you can see we were funded down at close to $4 million for all of our asks, inclusive of facilities, monies, parks and tree, highway maintenance, and engineering. This year, our task is always, what are the needs? And this is based on, the program managers, and we identify the year FY 26 is currently a need of $13.5 million. Okay, that's not unusual. It is never, our needs have never been fully funded, but the program, our responsibility as professional staff to identify to you, your system, what do we see and what's our recommendation? it has to get prioritized, it's gotta be, you know, balanced with other departments' asks. But as you look at it, I would just, you know, like to pay attention to some of the larger ticket items. We'll answer any of your questions. But I think really important, we didn't and don't sort of sort this based on magnitude, but in engineering, they are responsible for designing and construction of large infrastructure in the public way. And that's inclusive of, I'm sorry, you need to, I can zoom in on this if that's
Oh,
helpful. Is that?
No, I'm not gonna be able to read it.
Okay, yeah, you can take that, take one of those, okay? So if you kind of focus on, in the right of way, and, you know, Steve Dukran, it's his team who sort of puts these programs together. We can talk engineering first. What you're gonna highlight is the fact that our roads, you know, pavement management, we have a need of about $5 million, and you can see that extends out a number of years. And I'm going to sort of identify the fact that we are still trying to get caught up on our, you know, the condition of the roads. We have also included, I think for discussion, we might want to talk a little bit about the fact that culvert and bridge repairs, we have 780,000, and it's, you know, that order of magnitude. That's not unusual, but we do know recently we had a couple failures of culverts where rather than planning for them, we've just reacted to these emergency needs to the tune of, you know, close to about $1.5 million over the last couple of years. So whether we plan for it or have to cover it under emergency, you know, it's our job is to identify it and then go through the process with the commission as far as helping us understand and explain the priorities. That's kind of what we're here for, as well as sort of look at the messaging, so how we can help the community understand these. So this is the first step in the process. We have the good fortune of Anthony and Carrie here, if you have any sort of macro questions, but, you know, I'll let you folks.
I think it would be good, so just for everyone to remind, we had a study on the roads. We identified something like 26 to $27 million of backlog in repair. We are a little bit into it, so if you see the next 5 years, you're planning right now to just attack this backlog across the town and then going down to a more normalized level after that.
Correct.
One thing is, and again, perhaps to make sure everyone is on the same page and has the same understanding, is that the thought right now is to move that expenditures of 5 million plus per year over the next 5 years to tier 3 capital. And I want to make sure that everyone understands what that means.
No idea what you're talking
Exactly.
about.
That's, I don't know, Anthony.
Anthony, do you want to explain that, or do you want to?
Sure.
Do you want to come up to the table so we can put you on the spot, but more so people can hear you, you know, Lisa's picked up on our owl.
Sure. So good afternoon. So Anthony Salvi, I'm the town's chief financial officer. So when Sven says tier 3 is a category in our capital plan, which we would be looking to fund as an exempt, a debt excluded project. So that's similar to how the middle school was paid for. So that would require two things. That would require a town meeting vote to do that, because that's above what you already pay in taxes. And that would also require a ballot, vote at the ballot of the voters. So that's how that project would be funded on tier 3.
But it would mean this is paid down over 20 years.
It
So
would
on
be
a-
paid down, we would go through bond council. I'm not quite sure what the years would be. off the top of
15
my
or
head.
20, somewhere in that.
Definitely know a road project.
So we have not financed road projects over anything more than 10 years in the past. So we would have to have some further discussion and analysis, as Anthony mentioned, to see what the impact is and how that would impact future as well.
Right.
But it certainly would be 10 plus
Yeah,
Yeah, anytime we do borrowing like that, we work with bond counsel because Mass General Law kind of
Yeah.
gives us a guidance of how we can borrow.
it
for
would be
projects.
good, at least latest to town meeting, but in the next few months to understand, is this something in the 10, 15 or 20 years of paying down, because that has a cash flow impact and has an impact on the tax rate for the employee, for the employees, for the citizens. I was so far under the impression that it's something like 15 to 20 years we could pay that down. So just to make sure that this is not coming out of the 5 million ask here is not coming out of the cash at once for the taxpayer. So if it's 10 years, 500,000 come out of the annual for paying down plus interest. And if it's 20 years, it's 250 down plus interest.
But we would do an analysis of that and we'll work with our financial consultants, advisors and come up with a dollar amount.
And what is so far, my understanding on tier 3 is that is only for project of 5 million or more, or was there a change, or is it a threshold?
So it was, it's over 2.5 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's- We really have to look at anything over 2.5 million as a tier. We, just the way our budget is built
Yeah,
right now. But we haven't really had anything 2.5 to 5. Usually the tier 3s, we're talking in the tens of millions, but we're not set up to accommodate anything above 2.5 in tier 2.
yeah. But in effect, I think is what the thinking is, you're thinking in total over 5 years about roughly $26 million in total. And then if you talk to your bond people and so on, you're probably thinking about setting a framework around the whole package.
Yes.
That for future years, you're just drawing against that framework. Yeah.
It would be separate borrowings based on,
Based on approved
different when we go
funds,
out to borrow. We'd have some one authorization for the whole thing, and then there'd be periods of times where we would, like at the middle school, we got the first portion of that 2 years ago, and now I just went out and borrowed for the next phase of the project, not quite the final, but close to the final phase of the project.
So.
Yeah, and I will also add that the authorization through one town meeting and vote, very important, because what we see with the project schedules and construction schedules and commitments, the bigger the plan that we have, the more economical it will be, the more integrated it can be. And so when we develop our roads program, you know, it's a lot of work to be done in 5 years. So, you know, even if we had all the money next year, we couldn't do the project. So by spreading over 5 years, we get better, you know, we intend to get better contractors, better costs, more efficiencies as far as when we're doing the work, not waiting till after town meeting to get bids out. And then it's, you know, we're getting whatever contractors left, but we could sort of make more attractive contracts, get more efficiencies and better planning schedule. So if we're gonna do it, it does make sense to look at it kind of holistically over a 5-year, you know, period of time. And to get this work done, whatever cost we have, it's gonna require support. It's gonna be engineering services. It's also gonna be construction and administration services to do all this. But, you know, the goal is when we get caught up, we then get to go to that model of more maintaining roads, not catching up. And that's the long-term plan.
I have one more kind of, right now you put a $1 million placeholder in for stormwater. That links to the discussion we had before, the timing, what is in the general fund and what is in the new enterprise fund.
Yeah, Alan and I just literally talked about that for the first time this
Yeah,
morning.
so that's
There's a lot to figure out there.
Just when you see that the 1 million for stormwater is the placeholder we are talking about, it's either the one bucket or the other bucket.
Okay, because I was about to ask that, why do we have stormwater in there?
Yeah,
I thought
yeah,
we just-
exactly.
I thought we just threw that out of there.
Yeah, that's just that palindrome we have.
Goal is to-
I mean, I know I'm new, but I'm like, okay, like, some of the stuff is like, okay.
Then we have the whole section of facilities.
Yes,
Mhm.
So, that's a major new block.
correct.
We got.
It will new and just for the group and for in the community. So Public Works assumed facilities last year, for the first time. So we inherited some plans that we hadn't really been particularly involved with, but we inherited. We now have a facility manager, Russ Carlstead is sort of in the audience, who has been reevaluating the needs based on his experience and understanding and developing a plan, that now we can say, okay, here is someone who has got a sense of what, how many facilities are there, Russ? It's over,
Totals of 70 something buildings in town between all of these.
Yeah, so Russ and his team have been sort of doing the assessment. And there is one caveat where we're talking about when facilities, and I get into discussions all the time between our highway grounds and park and tree and facilities, they like to think of the four walls and a roof. In Concord, there's some, imagination of maybe it's a little bit more than that. I will say for this group, and it's important, we're still carrying in our budget, and this is so that, all departments of the town. So that's what we work for. We've identified some recreation, what we believe are recreation, interests in our budget, because there hasn't been the formal baton pass from, where is Doug White Field, for instance, where is Giroux Park and all that. So we're still working with our new park, recreation group and the townhouse to try and make sure, we're accounting for it. So again, this is a draft, and before we get too far down the road, we're working with Anthony and Carrie on, all right, we have an allowance for the Doug White Field, but it's really a placeholder. And
So on that topic.
Yeah.
I completely struggle who owns that wide field. So who's in the end? So I know there was ARPA funding for study on that approved by the select board. But who's managing that consultant who's doing the study? And who's in the end responsible to make decisions on that field? I can see that we are executing at a certain point, but are we now responsible? Is someone else? Who owns this thing?
So I think the answer is TBD right now.
Okay.
So the original agreement between the region and the town was for the maintenance of that field.
Yeah.
So now that we've identified just by the process of putting this on a capital plan that we know that we have to address it. So we have to have some internal discussions between Kerry, the town manager, and the regional school superintendent. And I think we're gonna be having those within the next couple of weeks to discuss a little bit more in depth. That one of those being
to be clear, Doug White Field are the artificial turf fields up by the high school.
high school.
Yeah.
So that are used by the high school.
By the high school.
Used by recreation, used by various athletic associations, so. And, with Concord and, working with Carrie and Anthony, and we're all kind of trying to figure this out. We've sort of made the case, well, we will manage and maintain certain things. That's about the extent of what we've been doing. And that's actually based on agreements, so there is agreements where Public Works has some responsibility. The question becomes, what about the actual ownership of the asset, not the maintenance of the asset?
Right.
And what's the town use? I think isn't there a moratorium on artificial turf?
Yeah.
So.
Yes, there's a 5-year moratorium.
Alright.
Went in a few years ago. It is.
I asked the town what their view is.
Yeah, my understanding is a moratorium, but it doesn't apply to town-owned fields.
Okay. And the last question I have to that is kind of if the user is dominantly probably the school with a little bit of recreational department, wouldn't that normally be sit in the budget of the school?
So what I've recently found out, meaning maybe the past couple of months, is that there's the Friends of the Doug White Field, and maybe I have that wrong, that collects fees from various groups. They do have funds aside that was intended for the replacement of that turf. So those are some of the things that we need to walk through, but there is another pool of money that's sitting with them right now that we would certainly be looking to use that before we use any taxpayer funds.
Okay. Sorry, I started with questions.
No.
So now-
You answered it, cause I was like, where's Doug White? The artificial turf has to be replaced, right? And it's probably bringing up the whole thing again if we go to natural or if we go back to artificial, and that's probably bubbling up. Unless it's already exploded.
I think that should be part of that ARPA.
Let's be part of the discussion,
Study,
yeah.
yeah.
Artificial turf fields normally last, they say about 10 years, maybe 12, you can stretch it. I think Doug White Field is 17 years, or if not a little older.
Yeah, no, I think it's just, it's beyond useful life, but
Yeah.
I can't, I know there was one field that was installed and then it was replaced shortly after, so, and I wasn't managing that, but at early teens, that was happening, yeah.
Yeah, so it's definitely at its end of useful life, and to the point where Public Works has done a fantastic job keeping that field able to be online, so it has to be addressed, and that's why we're talking about it now.
It's becoming a big issue in town again. It was a huge issue when it went in. And then people look at the Concord Academy ones, which is the most beautiful grass in the world, and they're like, they're next door. Why can't
Yeah,
we have
we're
that?
still in the infancy stage, so
Okay.
it really hasn't been a big topic where people have had the opportunity to weigh in yet.
Okay.
I think the biggest issue is the ownership, who owns
Right.
that,
Okay.
who manages that consultant, and who makes what decisions in the end.
True,
Yeah.
correct.
I would vote that we don't deal with that issue because we're gonna have enough people yelling about the
Hot potato.
stormwater. It's like, yeah, somebody else take the artificial turf one. Anyway, I probably
So,
should say that.
Other questions also to the other line items?
Yeah, no, just, again, this is sort of the introduction, and, when, as I've told you, you can always call me and ask questions, but what we're trying to do is be consistent with our past explanations and practice. And our job is to identify the needs. That's what this is. We know we're not gonna get fully funded for all these. We understand that, but at some point, there's gonna be some prioritization. There's gonna be various interests and stakeholders are gonna try and advance, areas that they think are important. There was a question earlier today on, what are we gonna do with safe, crosswalks and that. And if you look up in the engineering, you'll see we have a line item, pedestrian safety and bike improvements, that's, close to $1 million of, kind of identified need, whether that's funded or not, or partially funded. And what we've done, and I want to be very clear to, this group, is in the past, we made the mistake of identifying, not differentiating these things. They're all in one bin. And if I had $1 million and you had a $300,000 ask, you had a $500,000 ask, you had $1 million ask, you had a $200,000. When we vote $1 million at town meeting, you all heard that your program got support. It didn't happen that way. And then we end up having to try and justify why we're doing this and not that. And that's not really a staff decision. That's a town meeting decision. So that's why, we're very specific about traffic signals and signage. There's a certain amount of money that we have to have. And when we vote at town meeting and that's identified, we have the funds to manage it. We've had issues in the past with sidewalks. They've not received funding. So when people ask, well, we'd like a sidewalk extension, I have to say that was not funded. It's not something we enjoy doing, but we need to be transparent of why are we doing things. So it really isn't the town engineer determining and prioritizing what's more important. So.
Jeff, any questions on your end? No? So on that line, just one final comment from my end is, it would be great if this year the asset management tools would not be cut. I think it's a town, the people in Public Works run on big Excel files to keep control over the pipes, the streets, the sewers and everything, and having a decent asset management tool would make public works more efficient and would ultimately save us more money than we save when we cut $105,000 out of the budget. So that's just not a big item, but in the last 3 years, it was cut every year, so I'm just trying to highlight
I'm
that.
sure Alan's team has noted that as a priority within Clear Gov, so when we get to that discussion, we'll certainly have that.
Okay, questions from the public?
Yeah, so, on
Name
Doug-
and address.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ellen Quackenbush, 206, speaking for myself, not Transportation Advisory Committee. I have two comments. One, Doug White's Field, I hope, just as you're talking about the phosphates and stormwater, Doug White Field's disposal fee will be huge, partly due to toxic material. So I hope that that's taken into consideration. Life cycle costing is not just replacement. It's finding a place to take it and then the cost to do so. And I guess that's my only comment.
Okay.
Mark?
Mark Davis, Chair of the Tech, and speaking with regard to Tech, can we get a copy of this spreadsheet at some point? We have to kind of, start the.
It's a public.
Sure, yeah, you can definitely. Again, it's just as a draft, you're seeing the beginning of how the sausage is made, yeah.
Draft all over it. Is there a mechanism for having the essential items not cuttable, like the management software, et cetera? And also, is there any plan to get something back from the Stanford consultant that would help with making the case to the public for, the benefits of this kind of catching up with things and not kicking that down the road?
Sure, Steve, you want to answer that?
Yeah, so the Stantec scope that we're trying to get under contract right now includes providing input to a number of these items, like road network, sidewalk network, traffic improvements at intersections and so on. So that's currently in the scope of work, we're getting approved for them.
Janet Rothrock, 618 in Nurse-Ack Hill Road. I hope that in discussions about the Doug White Fields, grass takes at least same weight as artificial turf in consideration of being replaced. I also wonder if there is a group that has private money and presumably can raise more money to replace the field, and they're essentially gifting it to a public entity. We have a public-private partnership, and the town did a study on that in 2018. So I think we could go back to some of the guidance that we established there. And I'm curious, I would not be able to give the town a pony or a Ferris wheel, for instance. The town has to want those things. And they probably don't want it because somebody has to deal with feeding it and, all that other stuff, or, whatever the Ferris wheel liability. So I would assume that the public entity that receives the field, if it's given by a private group, needs to express interest in receiving it. And so that's one thing. And then the fact that even if it's the schools and they say the school committee wants it, that they share the land with the town. And the watershed from the high school flows into, for instance, the Hugh Cargill well, or the lands, or, goes into Hapgood Forest or whatever. But we share the land, the water, the air with the schools. So are they allowed to put something on their property that they want, even if they can find private funding, if it in any way impinges on the town. And then, I guess the last thing I would say is that if it gets to if they put in an artificial turf field this time, and then it comes to the end of its life in say 10 to 15 years, and then it becomes a huge liability to get rid of because they're not recycling these. There's a plant that's supposedly going to be built in Pennsylvania, but right now the aerial photograph just shows a road, and then they're lining all these things up like big green cylinders furry cylinders all along this road. And there's no way to get rid of them right now. And it's only gonna get worse because there are so many of them in place now. So it may be a huge liability to get rid of. And the schools would probably push that, want to bounce that back to the town or ask the taxpayers to pay, and it all comes out of the same pocket, the taxpayer's pocket. So I would think the town would have some concerns about liability, or I don't know, I'm not, that's an Anthony question. But I would think there are a whole raft of questions to be involved. It's not simply I'm sorry, Bob.
No, I think you bring a lot of questions, and I think it comes back to the thing is the study that was approved with our funding, who's managing that, who's responsible, collecting these questions, running a process that is transparent for the citizens in the town, understanding the different aspects. I assume township doesn't take any gift that normally needs to be approved by the select board, from what I saw so far. But we have to have answers to exactly the broad range of questions you just raised. So that needs to be figured out in that process. But so far, that is a placeholder in here. Okay? Other questions? No? No? Oh. Thank you. We are getting, that was my agenda, to the director's report.
All right, based on recommendations, let me see if I can find, it's gonna be interesting. These are there. We are gonna focus on engineering. We've decided that rather than do what I call a whiff and grape shot with all our divisions and updates, we'd focus on one or two divisions. So Steve, Dukran is present. His team has been responsible for a lot of activities. And I will say, even with the direct report, we don't always repeat things in it, but some of those we kept just so we had, complete context. So if you read through it, it would be helpful. But with that, I'm going to find the presentation, and Steve, you are on.
Yep, got him here because it's a one-stop shop for me. You'd see, we did prepare an extensive report in September. That was written up, but we didn't present.
Yeah.
So what we did for this October meeting is to kind of go back, because we had to go back to the last meeting prior to the summer break. So it's a bit lengthy, but it's just full of nice pictures, and you can look at them. So the first one is the completion of the Giro Recreation Area. A lot of work on the pavilion was done, and that came to completion a few weeks ago. And it's looking really nice out there. Photograph shows the kiosk, the sign there, shows the bike racks and a bike repair station. And there's a little sign out in the street in Commonwealth Ave. You may hear that some people are having a hard time figuring out what that sign is saying. So the new owners of the park will probably address that. We're going to turn over to new owners. All right. We started this project in terms of design last year, but construction came about this year. So that's a before, and then the after following it. Yeah, so the, if you just go back to the slide before, the, what's left to do, it's that bollard, it's a illuminated bollard. And we had to go through the HTC for approval. And we just got approval a few weeks ago. And that's that has a long lead time. So
Where does it go?
it goes, go back. It goes to, what's that?
Is it right here? Yeah,
Right there,
here.
where the cone is, right?
So so we have new bump outs.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
people aren't familiar with it, and, you know, there's a concern that they may not pay attention or know
Right.
go straight. And obviously that's where pedestrians will be, so the bollard is an object to sort of call out, and at night, it'll be illuminated so that people can see that, and that's where, you know, working with the HDC, is it the right sort of design, looking at the lighting and that sort of thing to comply.
And weren't there also trees planted on over there in these little?
Either there,
The trees are. Let's see where it is, where the tree
This
grates,
one?
yeah, they're a cone right
Yeah,
there,
there.
on
Okay.
both sides.
Yeah, okay.
So those are coming, and also the crosswalks, if you look at the finished picture,
Yeah, they're not striped.
right, they just have,
oh, here, yeah.
right, they just have two lines. So what's going in there is a patterned type crosswalk.
Yeah, I was waiting for that,
Yeah, I've been going over that going, I wonder what's coming in here.
So it's scheduled in a week or two to get done. It will be a brilliant red color, right? Okay, I'm getting consensus, yeah, yeah, it'll be a color. Yeah, yet
Color.
to be chosen.
Take green and green line, so it will not.
Okay, all right.
You'll know, you won't see it.
All right, following that, some extensive paving on Main Street. Obviously, we were sensitive to celebrations next year, wanted to get this area all improved. And, so Main Street and Monument Square. So everyone is aware, the coating of pavement we did in Monument Square is a thin layer, just to kind of prep it for the next few years. Our plan is to look at that whole area for traffic improvements. There are sidewalk, ADA issues that need to be corrected. So it's a much bigger project, but that's down the road, once we can get the funding, prepare the design and go forward from there.
But the rotary is not done on. So around the pole that's
Correct.
done,
Not yet.
not yet.
Not yet, and some of it, you'll see some new pavement there because of the National Grid project, which we highlight next.
Yeah,
But the entire rotary, that has to be looked at. And you can't do major improvements. The regulation is, if you do major improvements, you gotta correct the handicap access.
yes.
And those are very difficult ones. They're historic in nature, so we have to get designs that will meet, the historic character. So,
Can I ask a question about the paving? There's some driveways that have up to a 3-inch drop in between their driveway and the new pavement. And I talked to some engineer and they said that will be done by hand, that they will actually go by hand and put the bituminous out there and then tamp it down. Do you know when that's gonna happen? Because I have a couple of neighbors who are like, if this happens and it's still like this, then we're not gonna have an ice dam at the bottom of my driveway.
okay, I would need to know exactly where you're referring to.
Okay.
It's not the Main Street or Monument Square, right?
It's on Main Street,
The Main Street.
on Main Street.
So probably that's unfinished work. We'd have to
Yeah, it
look
is
at that.
unfinished work.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering, it's still gonna happen though.
Yes.
Just because once people found out you're a commissioner, it's horrible. It's like, it's like I wear it like I wanna go incognito now, but I had a lot of neighbors like, when are they gonna fix this?
Okay, I'll get a schedule for that.
Okay,
Yeah, I know.
Just-
With most projects, we have a month
okay, just,
punch list items.
I'm
come back
caring
and-
about it, because they're my neighbors, I'm like, hey,
No, we're very good at completing projects,
okay.
but probably not right away. All right, next we have, that's what we're talking about, the National Grid project on Lexington Road. They're doing a gas relay. And that's scheduled to be done by the end of this month. I think they may be a week or two behind. But they will clean up that area and get it ready for next year as well.
A lot of coordination, you know, not by accident, getting that work done, dovetailing it with the work that engineering's planning. You know, we do the best we can to integrate these things and, you know, when they're done, you know, it's gonna be a nice corridor. The downtown will look really. really
I
good.
actually, you did, so they did a really good job on the Main Street. Redoing the timing of it, it was not a lot of disruption. I really have to compliment you, and I think it is important to get National Grid here done first and then do it.
Yes,
right.
that's right.
My hometown was famous for redoing a street. And then for the following 5 years, first doing electricity, then gas. So having that really done before, I think, is really good.
And even the downtown, you'll note this picture is at night.
Yeah.
We had to do a lot of this work because of the commercial business, you know, traffic, you know, at night and, you know, our staff was out there, you know, sort of doing inspections and it was, you know, a little unusual, but, you know, I think all went well.
Okay, so those are the main streets we just talked about, and we do a residential street paving. Here's some examples that were done over the few months. Pine Street, we have before and after pictures. One of the things that like I was talking about, if you're doing major construction on a road, you have to correct the handicap ramps. So there's an example there on the top right corner. All right, and
So on High Street, Island Street, Island Street.
yes,
So I think that's coming to a final
yes.
close.
I spoke with a contractor yesterday and he didn't give an exact date, but he said over the next 2 weeks, hopefully by the end of next week. Having done downtown Main Street areas, they want to focus now on some of these residential streets, some of which are already done, but they're coming back, bringing their smaller equipment. In fact, this week, starting tomorrow, they will be reclaiming 1 or 2 small streets and into next week and paving following that. So once they get equipment here, the paving equipment, Highland will be the first street they will get to.
But the drainage issue is solved.
The
Yeah.
drainage is, and you'll see some photographs of what we
Okay.
encountered on Highland Street.
And just to underscore the schedule, we are regrettably always in the October, November window of trying to button things up while we can put the new pavement down. And it's always a winter issue and it's part and parcel because of the way we get the funding. And that's where if we can sort of front load it and know that we have this commitment, our interest is to get out early and not be late, you know, so that's sort of one of the potential opportunities.
All right, some of the things we do as well, under the pavement management program, we do a lot of crack sealing. And that's a good example of how the cracks they vary. We have been doing fog sealing as a treatment. So far, so good on the results. So we may continue to do that.
Steve, just describe fog sealing, just.
Yes, fog sealing is a spray of the entire road width. And it makes it black, like when you do a driveway. And it's the idea behind it, it seals all the, you know, the little imperfections, the pores, and it makes the pavement, it rejuvenates the pavement. So you get some more years out of the pavement.
It's
And
like hydrating your face, almost.
it's good for the winter. Then we do striping, you know, we refresh the striping at least once a year in most places, and some other areas we do twice a year where, and the wearing is, you know.
So I noticed on Main Street with the new striping for the crosswalk. The striping is a different material
That's correct.
than the other
The
one.
long lines.
Yeah.
Yes, so the crosswalks and other symbols, the arrows and so on, they have been done with thermoplastic,
Yeah.
which gives you a longer
Yes.
service life. And not only does it last longer, you know, when you get down to the later part of the year, the regular paint kind of fades. So you go through the winter months and they're not effective, right? Making the road unsafe. By using thermoplastic, you have that fresher look, that, you know, reflectiveness that you want. So that's what we're trying to, it's more expensive, but because it lasts longer,
Should we use it more then, or?
yeah. It's the cost. We
Yeah,
have,
but again, to your point is, if it lasts longer, you might have to do far less restriping.
yes, but the net result is higher costs.
It's still net higher.
Yes.
Okay,
Is there a concern if it's plastic of it going into our stormwater system?
I've heard that before. I do not know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if it's a pollutant.
Microplastic,
Yeah,
yeah, someone brought up, and I'm not sure.
okay.
okay.
But why, so we don't do the long lines, and another reason that I heard, I'm not sure about it. Long lines, if they're in thermoplastic, they're more slippery, so they're not good for bicycles.
Oh, yeah,
That's what I heard.
yeah.
Yes. All right, so this is a list of all the work on paving for this year, 2024. Green is what's been done, maybe with some punch list items like some driveways tie-in. The orange or yellow, those are under construction. In the pinkish is mostly residential streets, couple of sections of Main Street in the west side of town. So those are getting started this week and will be done by mid to late November.
So how many miles of streets will be redone after you're finished with this?
For this year?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good question, but my guess is probably around 6 or 7 miles. I can get you that number.
Yeah, it's just.
Yeah. So we're doing this under 2 contracts. I know one contract is about 5 miles. Can't tell you the other one. Yeah. Okay, and this is a new project about to start construction, starting next week. It involves the replacement of a water main on
Yeah.
Silver Hill Road, Turning Mill Road, and Crest Brook. Not all of Silver Hill, we're doing it in the first phase, starting on Monument Square, all the way to the intersection of Turning Mill and Silver Hill. And so it's putting on the water main, fixing some drainage problems that we have out there, some serious drainage problems that's causing Turning Mill to actually be all torn up. And then reclaiming the street, at least getting binder pavement down this year. And final paving next year. And the phase 2, which is the rest of Silver Hill Road, same kind of work. The design is being done currently to bid in the wintertime and hopefully construct that next year. So that's a pretty significant project for us.
You know, it's again, for these sorts of projects, people get informed of it through a mailing or door hanger months in advance. They're part of the discussion. If they have issues, we want to hear about it. And then before we actually do the construction, we typically have a neighborhood meeting. So we'll invite people to attend, where we'll have our team, staff involved to sort of walk people through what to expect, the various phases of the work. And I don't know if the contractor was present for this one as well.
It was there, it was just yesterday, he was
Yeah.
present.
So that's sort of the routine when you get into these sorts of neighborhoods.
All right, this here is a major project too, failed culvert on Baker Ave. We talked about it before. We had a number of inspections, investigations, using camera, dewatering, all of that to discover a break where there's a 3-barrel culvert coming from Concord Green and joining to the town system. So at the joint between these 2 systems, there's a failure causing a sinkhole in the street. If you go out there, you'll see the street's plated, the sidewalk is blocked. And so we have a consultant on board ready to design the improvement. The plan right now is to do a temporary fix for the winter time, get the plates and the obstructions out of the street and work over the design over the winter and put it out to bid for the major
Okay.
reconstruction. Okay. More pictures of Baker Ave.
This is the pipe here, you can see. That's the culvert.
Right.
Okay.
That's a good side of it.
Yeah, I was saying.
I was gonna say, that looks fun. I don't know what the issue is. Just giving yourself busy work. That looks perfectly
Yeah.
usable.
I tried to crawl
The
in.
sinkhole in the street, we're fine.
Yeah, there's a stone wall that's right adjacent to the failure.
Yeah.
Trying to keep that stone wall intact is gonna be challenging.
Is it historic? So
It's masonry and
okay,
I don't think it's historic, but it's probably historic for the owner. It's
okay.
Concord Green. So if it fails, it's a major reconstruction to put that together. All right, some of the work that we did the Fairyland parking lot down,
Yeah.
right? So some before and after, you see the before there was some major puddling, flooding, drainage problems. We solved that. With a picture on the bottom left. And at the same time, we paved Walden Street, so the outcome was really good in that area. And here's Highland Street, is what we found. Look at those pipes that we pulled out, solid block. And with roots and this debris. And so we had to go in there and put some new piping, new structures. And we talked about MS4, the previous discussion on stormwater utility. We got the report out for last year's work, the period ended just like our fiscal year, June 30th. And our new stormwater engineer put together this report that we got out to the EPA. The bullets there are just all of the things that need to be done by the permit. Very, very significant effort that we have to take on. And I think the final slide here shows some additional work that we are doing at the landfill. We do environmental monitoring. During the course of the year, we have the quarterly monitoring for air, gas, and water. The project that we did, a small project, is replace that gas vent turbine that pulls the methane out of the ground. Over on the right side of the slide, we do spend some time on Warner's Pond. The stormwater engineer is also on the task force with the chair. So to provide technical review of any kind of work being done. And as well as the dam itself, the Warner's Pond Dam, we are in charge of making sure that it gets the inspection needed as required by the Office of Dam Safety. And currently we have a consultant preparing an inspection and maintenance plan so that we can formalize that and address the needs of that dam as required by the plan.
There's been a lot of interest in that, and we are just sort of holding off on any additional maintenance or clearing until we actually get that report. But in essence, the real intent is to ensure that wooded, trees don't grow up and compromise the structural integrity. And we don't have an official sort of maintenance and inspection plan, so we figured it would be good to establish that, and based on the public interest, it's a good thing for us to have anyway, so.
Wasn't there talk about removing the dam?
That's a whole
That's
other
a
initiative.
Warner's Pond task
Sorry,
force.
sorry.
I'm fortunate to sit on this.
Okay, just, I don't wanna spend a lot of money fixing it, and then have these guys say, pull it.
I think
We're maintaining it, not fixing it. Yeah.
Gotcha.
it's too early to
Okay.
tell what the outcome will be out of the
Okay.
task force.
Yeah, it's required by the Office of Dam Safety to make sure it's
Yes,
maintained.
okay.
Other questions from the commissioners?
Nope.
Just remember, we are already 5 minutes above time. Any questions? Oh, yes.
I'd like to, again, compliment the staff on the repaving process to minimize the disruption on that section of Main Street, my library, the flagpole and, Logan Street. That was a very difficult, challenging process, I'm sure. And I think you did a great job at it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Other questions? Online? No,
Don't see any?
everyone checked out, yeah?
To adjourn the meeting.
Second?
Yeah, I'm in favor, yay.
First, second, now roll call. Jeff Vassar?
Aye.
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 Sunviva, aye. Unanimously. The meeting is adjourned at 6:06.